Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This Day in History. It is May 30th, 2024, and where I'm at, it is a bright, beautiful, gorgeous day. It's warm, blue skies. Oh, it's like perfect weather. I don't know what it's like where you're at, but hopefully you're having a blessed day. So, we have a couple interesting birthdays. We have some revolts. We have some dedications. We have some sentencing for crimes against humanity. We have just a bunch of good stuff here. So let's get into it, right? So the very first birthday is, and mind you, all these birthdays, these are all 20th century birthdays. I didn't find any birthdays that were, from Middle Ages or the medieval times or anything like that. So these are all going to be 20th century birthdays. And to be honest, quite a few of them I've never even heard of. I don't know who these people are. So, and then there's, a couple that, one in particular, I have heard of him. I just, never really listened to his music. But at any rate, so 1903, Countee Cullen is an American poet. He was born on this day in, gotta read my chicken scratch. Okay, 1909, Benny Goodman. Benny Goodman was an American musician, and that's the musician I was talking about, where I've heard the name. I mean, the name is, he's very popular within American music, but I think he was like big band, because that was definitely big band era. The music era that he grew up in, that he would have excelled in, being born in 1909. So he would have been in the era of like the 30s and 40s of, the era of big band. And so yeah, his birthday's today in 1909. In 1963, we have a British chemist and astronaut by the name of Helen Sharman. Yeah, Helen Sharman. She was born on this day in 1963. 1974, CeeLo Green. You may have heard of him. He's a singer. He's a songwriter. He's a rapper. He was born on this day in 1974. Trying to roll my window so you can hear me better. 1975, Marissa Mayer. She's an American software engineer and businesswoman. She was born on this day. So we're going back into history here. No, we're not, because in 1980, Steven Gerrard is an English football player. His birthday is today. Now, when they say English football, I'm assuming they're referring to soccer. Because, well, football, you kick it, and you throw it. In soccer, you just kick it, and only the goalie, or tender, can handle the ball. So, now we're going back in time. So, on this day, 1381, there was a peasants' revolt in England, and it was brought on partly due to a very unpopular poll tax. And Yeah, so it didn't fare very well, and there was a this peasant uprising, a rebellion that the British had to deal with, and so that was on this day in 1381. We fast forward to 1431. This is when Joan of Arc will be burned at the stake. She was charged with witchcraft and heresy. And I suspect a lot of that's brought on by the fact that she was female and she led troops during the 100 Years' War. And that one of the big things about her is that she had often said that she spoke to God directly, and God directed her to, fight for France and to have an active part in leading troops to, in this fight against the British, or the English. The powers that be were threatened by her popularity. They were, because the thing is, you got to take into account that, like back then it was a very patriarchal society, as in men ruled, right? So their position was threatened by having a strong female in leadership of any sort. And she was real big on seeing the Dauphin, that's a French prince. She was very adamant about seeing the Dauphin crowned king, and she was very pushy about, the defense of France, and a lot of her motivations was based on seeing France free from British occupation. You got to take into account that this was 100 Years' War, literally 100 years that the English and the French were fighting, and it was predominantly over, I believe, I could be mistaken here, I believe it was predominantly fought over English possession of French land, and the French obviously wanting to have independence of any foreign power in their land. So, it was a contest of wills, as it were, over land. And so when Joan of Arc came around, she was very adamant about kicking the British out. There is some speculation that she was personally affected by some British soldiers. Mila Jovovich was in a movie about Joan of Arc, and it was suggested in that movie that Joan took a keen interest in wanting to kill Englishmen because Englishmen had raided her home and had raped and murdered her sister. I don't know how historically accurate that is, but I mean, that I can see where that would be a good motivation to want to go take the fight to the enemy. But yeah, on this day in 1431, Joan of Arc will be put to death by burning at the stake because of her alleged heresy and witchcraft. See, that's the thing, is anytime you see burning at the stake, there's always going to be, 9 times out of 10, there's always going to be a charge of heresy and or witchcraft associated with that, because that is how they were so barbaric back then. That was how they dealt with heretics and witches. And their rationale was that if you were truly innocent, then God would save you from the wrath of this, punishment. And in that, if you didn't, it's the same in the 1600s when, during the Salem witch trials, when they burned witches or they tried to drown witches or whatever, their obtuse, archaic thinking was that if you were truly innocent of the charges, then God would save you somehow, and it would be a public miracle. Moving right along, we move into the 19th century in 1806. He wasn't president yet, but future president Andrew Jackson would be embroiled in a duel with Charles Dickinson. And to the point where that is where, so if you know what duels are, it's a gentleman's way of settling a score. Apparently, Dickinson had offended Jackson's wife, and the good husband that he was defending her honor, and so therefore he challenged Dickinson to a duel where Dickinson accepted, because that's what you did. If you didn't, you were branded a coward. And so they would duel. They had flintlock musket pistols. They counted off paces. They turned and they fired, or however they did it back then. One took turns. They either took turns or they counted off paces, turned around, and fired. Well, Dickinson did get a round off and did actually hit Andrew Jackson, but didn't kill him, obviously. And it's said that Andrew Jackson kept that round in his chest for the rest of his life, that they never removed it. Probably because medical practices back then, he might have died from like infection due to the surgery itself. At any rate, so Dickinson fires. That round is lodged in. That's why Jackson had the moniker of Old Hickory, like, because hickory is a tough wood, and like he couldn't take him down. So Jackson fires and obviously kills the guy, and duel was over with. And this was back then. It was a gentleman's way of settling a score, and it was legalized murder. It really was. It was just, you could, if you had a legitimate grievance, this is what you could do, and you could go kill the guy and not have any repercussions whatsoever. I mean, eventually the practice was done away with, rightfully so, because, that's just archaic and barbaric. So, 1814. It's the first of the treaties of Paris that end the Napoleonic Wars. And so that, the first of the treaties was signed today in 1814. In 1854, we have the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And it was an act that was basically governed by popular sovereignty. And what it did is it had basically given the territories the right to choose whether they were going to be pro-slavery or anti-slavery. It eventually would lead to, other compromises where basically what would happen was that when the United States expanded and added more states to the Union, they always, and this is why they do it today as well, is that two states have to be admitted at the same time. And at that time, it was a pro-slavery state versus an abolitionist state. So it kept everything balanced in Congress or in the Senate. So because the representatives and the senators, they would be balanced between pro and anti-slavery. The practice is still today, because of tradition, that when states are admitted into the Union, they're always admitted in twos, and they're usually admitted within a year of each other, 6 months to a year from each other. Case in point, you had the last states to be admitted to the Union were Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska was in 1949 and Hawaii was in 1950, and it was in keeping with that tradition of two states needing to be admitted to the Union at any one given time. So that was 1854. 1911, we have the first Indianapolis 500 race. It was, the very first race was run. Care to guess how long it took for the winner of that race to complete the 500 miles? Give you a moment. Okay, it took 6 hours and 42 minutes for them to successfully complete the 500-mile race in 1911. Got to remember, I don't think these guys are doing 60 miles an hour. Maybe. I doubt it. If it took them 6 hours, they certainly weren't going, well, maybe. I don't know. All you mathematicians out there, you can figure out what the top speed must have been if it took them 6 hours and 42 minutes to successfully complete a 500-mile journey. In 1922, on this day in 1922, the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. is dedicated. It is said that Lincoln's son was in attendance, and he was in attendance when they dedicated that monument to President Lincoln. So that was done on this day in 1922. We go 20 years later, we are embroiled in World War II. And on this day, the British Royal Air Force, they send 1,000 bombers to Cologne, Germany on a sortie to inflict some heavy damage to the Germans. And so that was on this day in 1942. And we are going to end this episode on a high note, I think anyway. It's 2012. On this day, 2012, you have Charles Taylor. He is the former president of Liberia. Charles Taylor is sentenced to 50 years in prison for crimes against humanity. It had a direct correlation with the warfare that had gone on in Sierra Leone. So that's a good note, when you have someone who commits acts of crimes against humanity. So in all likelihood, there's probably some genocide going on, some, barbaric things that humans do to each other. And he is sentenced to 50 years for those crimes. So it had to have been pretty significant. Like I said, it had to do with some form of genocide. So we're talking like, it's not just a few people killed. For something like that, we're probably talking like hundreds. I don't know all the specifics, but it's always a good thing when you can put a dictator behind bars. So with that said, that is this day in history for May 30th. We will do it again tomorrow. And hopefully we'll have nice weather again. We'll see. But hopefully you are having nice weather. Hopefully you are having a good day. So take care. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a blessed day. Take care. Bye.